Hey guys, on our other channel, on the Japan channel, we have a playlist of martial arts videos, and just about every time we post one of those videos we end up with big debates from people talking about which martial arts is better, which martial art is better, and which martial art would win in a fight, and which martial art is useful and which one's not useful, and all that sort of thing. So just a couple of observations. But just a quick bit of background too. I had 20 years in security, crime prevention, law enforcement world, industry, and 25 years of spending time every week in dojos, so in Australia and in Japan. So just based on what I've seen from that experience, just got a couple of comments to make. One of them is, made a video once before about why people do martial arts, and there's many reasons that people do martial arts, and a lot of them have nothing to do with fighting at all. It's more about personal development and health and other reasons, and particularly places like Japan, where Japan's a really non-violent country, so likely there'd be very few people in Japan that actually do martial arts for self-defense, because the chances of getting involved in some sort of violence in Japan is really remote. With the exception of people like the police and things like that. Japanese police do Aikido and other martial arts like that too, that they can use to defend themselves if they get involved in a violent situation. But again, even for Japanese police, violence is rare. So just that comment first. More about that on the other video, on the why people do martial arts video. As for which martial art's more effective, it's a funny argument to have, because karate can't beat Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Aikido is not useful against this, and Taekwondo and karate. It's not really the art that is competing with another art, it's the person. It's the person who does it. It's the person who's practiced, and just saying that one martial art is better than another martial art is making a whole heap of assumptions that you can't make, because individuals are different individuals. So you can't say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is going to beat karate, because it depends on the individual. It depends on which two people you're putting into the cage to fight each other, doesn't it? So, and I've seen over the years, I've seen many examples of this, where you get some guy who's all trained up, and he's in some situation sometime, and suddenly someone grabs him by the throat and he just loses it, because it's a lot to do with people's personality, and of course training helps, and what you've been trained in helps, of course, it's important as well. But really what it comes down to is the person's heart and the person's willingness. And I've seen it before, guys that train 3 or 4 times a week, and they're all trained up and they pump iron, and they're all seriously looking, serious fighting dude, and then just getting a bit of a heated argument with someone, and suddenly someone grabs them by the throat and they lose it, and just lose it, and lose the fight, basically, because they're not in the right frame of mind, or don't have the spirit, and they just lose. I've also seen a situation where a pretty skinny guy, smallish, sort of average sized guy, was being attacked by 2 larger guys who were big, strong, muscly dudes, and this guy, the smaller guy, had no martial arts experience at all, no fighting experience at all, never been in a fight before, and I know this because he's a really close friend. And these 2 guys just pushed him, and eventually he just went for him, and he put them both down. He just hammered them, threw punches at them, and put one down, and then turned around and put the other one down. And the first one got up, and he put him down again, and just hammered the pair of them. It was one of the most dramatic fights I've ever seen. And this guy my friend had no experience at all. He was just a little skinny guy. And he was healthy, he used to run a lot, but he had no training at all, and that's my point. And same in the security industry, I used to see it all the time as well. Guys that were all trained up and they just lose it. So You know, and the other thing is that you don't know what else people are capable of, and you don't know what the training is that they've got. And particularly things like, interestingly, Aikido is a classic. It always gets the guys who've really know little about it, but they watch it and it's all fake and it's all choreographed and it's all this, that and the other. And the people that I've practiced Aikido with and have seen different styles of Aikido and practiced different styles of Aikido and experienced it, and some of those guys on the mat would be the same. If they got into a physical confrontation in real life, chances are that they wouldn't be able to do much about it, that they just don't have the heart, you know, and that's not why they do Aikido. They do it because of their health and they do it for other practice. But also practice Aikido with guys who are really formidable, and you can throw anything that you want at them. And they don't just use the Aikido, and that's the thing. These martial arts, it's not like a true martial artist doesn't just have his waza from his martial art that he uses. You know, the best martial artists in history have always been the guys that take a martial art and they put it into themselves with all the other stuff that's in there. So a really good martial artist doesn't just do his karate kata or his taekwondo kata or whatever he does. Unless, of course, it's a taekwondo person that's doing it for sport, or a judo person that's only doing it for sport. But when you're talking about who'd win in a fight, it's the guy that's got the heart and got the willingness to go. Like my little friend, he had the willingness and he wasn't scared of those two big guys, and he just went hard, and those two guys got scared. It's the little aggressive dog taking on the two big dogs, and the two big dogs ended up getting the crap beaten out of them because they didn't have the heart. You know, so the guy that's got the heart and the willingness, who brings his martial arts training from whatever it is. You know, I've done Kyudo with people who do Kyudo that have got huge heart. It teaches discipline, it teaches self-control, it teaches focus, it teaches spirit, enhances the spirit, and whatever it is that they've brought in and they've put inside them. Miyamoto Musashi, Japan's most famous swordsman, used to do all his sword training and all these different martial arts training and all that sort of stuff. And he also did ikebana, which is flower arranging, and shodo, which is, you know, calligraphy. And tea ceremony. That was the other thing he did, tea ceremony, because it was all about that discipline and that control and that being tranquil and calm, which, you know, in a real confrontation in real life, when you've got someone in your face calling you a fuckwit and an asshole and a cunt and all these other things that they call you and they're right in your face, that's when that calmness and self-control makes all the difference. And that's where the real people who can really fight come into it, where they can keep their control under that sort of circumstance. Whereas some guy that spends lots of time in the dojo and the gym's all pumped up, has only worked on his physical characteristics, hasn't worked on his real heart and his character, can just lose it in a situation like that, lose his temper and then lose the fight as a result. So, you know, it's about the person. It's the person that you're taking on. You know, you get some Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy with no heart, and another guy who's done no martial arts at all but has big heart. You know, you just can't make big generalizations. If you guys look at those videos, that, you know, the one with the little 8-year-old weapon guy, you know, it's had 4 million views, and there's hundreds of ignorant comments on that video. But usually by people who've done no training. People who've really trained for a long time recognise that there's more to it than just the waza, you know. And that they watch the kata and they say, kata's no good in a real fight. Well, it's not about using kata in a real fight. It's not about whether kata's useful in a real fight. It's all about building self-control and self-discipline, and, you know, whether or not they actually apply any of those kata techniques in a real fight's a separate matter. You know, so those sort of comments, they're generally extremely ignorant by people who've done very little or no training. And, you know, I've challenged guys on those videos before who've got on there and said, oh, that guy knows nothing about nothing. And it's like, well, post a video of you doing better. And not once has anybody actually done that. You know, they just disappear. You never hear from them again after you say that to them, because, you know, they're armchair experts, you know. They're armchair experts that have never actually been in a real conflict. Might expand on that a bit too. When we employed people in the security industry and we needed guys to work as bodyguards or as security officers or whatever, we'd always ask them in the interviews, if they'd had any conflict. So, okay, you've been in the security industry for 5 years, or you've been a police officer for 5 years. What conflicts have you been involved in? And we'd listen to what they'd say. And you get guys there who'd say, oh, I've been in dozens of fights, and there was this fight I was in, and that fight I was in, and this fight I was in, and that fight I was in. I had to break this guy's face and knocked out his teeth and broke his arm and all sort of stuff. That's interesting. And then we get another guy come in and say, I've been in the security industry for 20 years. What conflicts have you been involved in? Oh, only 2 major ones. They're the guys that we'd give another chance to and ask a few more questions to, because that's the other part of the thing as well. These guys that talk about how many street fights they've been in have some issues. You know, the really smart guys who've really evolved and are really smart guys don't get into conflicts. First of all, you don't let yourself get into a situation where it's likely to happen. And the second thing is that if you do get a conflict happen, if you're really confident and you're really intelligent, you should be able to solve that problem without violence. That's what it's really about. Remember, I was in a dojo in Australia once, and we're in this South Brisbane in Queensland, and it's a bit rough area, and we're doing Aikido, right? It's actually Aiki-Taijutsu. And it was a fairly hardcore Aiki-Taijutsu, and we had big glass windows at the front of the dojo, and some dude came in off the street, and he was either drunk or drugged or just had some mental issues, had some problems, and he came in and sat down on the side of the mat and kept calling out, and he wanted to fight, basically. He got all inspired by watching what we were doing and decided he wanted to fight, which was pretty stupid. Aiki-Taijutsu, we had Bokto and Jo and Naginata and all sorts of weapons in there, and you know, and a whole heap of people who are really good at using them, and this guy was sitting on the side of the mat trying to pick a fight. And our teacher went over and talked to him for a little while and said to him, no, we don't fight here, we're just practicing this art, we don't fight here. And he talked to him for a few minutes and got him up and walked him to the door, didn't touch him, didn't lay a hand on him, just talking to him really quietly and peacefully, and walked him outside and sat down with him outside and talked to him for ages while we were all training, and then 20 minutes later or something wandered back in again. No violence at all. No violence at all. And actually, that same night, half the dojo was a Aiki-Taijutsu class, the other half was a Taekwondo class, and there was a little guy, excellent little guy. He actually was a Taekwondo teacher and a Hapkido teacher. And he was a weapon too. He was a real little nugget and a real weapon. And I remember he talked to that guy as well as the guy came in the door. So the 2 teachers that were there, both the senior teachers that were there, both had little conversations with this guy. And this guy was dead set after a fight when he walked in, and walked out without a fight, and sat down, talked to them, and then walked away. We never saw him again. So I think the teacher actually invited him to come back another day when he was feeling better. So when you're feeling better another day, come back in and practice with us. But we won't fight, but we'll practice with you, you know. And talked him into it, and the guy just walked away and never came back. And that's real skill. That's real skill. Instead of beating the guy, knocking his teeth out, which is, you know, that shows our teacher was a real martial artist and had real heart, you know. Just another quick one too. The final straw that triggered this video was I let one go about a video on the other channel about live sword practice. It was Shinken practice with real swords, live katana, and that triggered a whole heap of debate about which would win, a katana or a long sword, you know, European long sword. And again, it's the same point. It depends on who's holding it, doesn't it? But it made me think while I was watching these guys debate it. Miyamoto Musashi, you guys might know the story, but one of his most famous fights, he had like 35 fights or something, 36 fights to the death in his life. And one of his most famous fights was he went out to a little island, rowed a boat out to a little island, and he fought Kujira. And no, not Kujira, that's whale. What's his name? Kujira? He fought some dude, right? So he's gone out to some little island on a beach, and on the way out, another guy was rowing the boat, and on the way out he picked up a wooden oar, and he knew that this other guy used a long sword, long katana. And usually the katana, if you put the tip of the katana on the floor, the hilt of the katana should come up to your belly button. So if you're a tall person, you usually have a longer katana than a short one. But some guys, like this guy that he fought, had a longer one. So what he did was he sat in the boat and he carved, he had a wooden oar in the boat, and he carved it make it like a box style, make it like a bokken, so like a wooden sword, and got off the boat at the beach and killed this guy with this wooden sword, you know. And which, when you talk about which sword's better, well, he did it with an oar. And interestingly, when he got to about 30 years old, by then he killed, you know, 30 people or something, and with a sword, you know, in sword fights. And because he'd go places, just walk in places, and people would challenge him because they wanted to try and beat him because he was so famous. So he was in sword fights all the time. And about 30, he became a Buddhist, and he decided he didn't want to kill people anymore. So he stopped carrying his katana, because if he had the katana and people attacked him, he had to kill them. And he stopped carrying the katana and started carrying a box style, a bokken, so a wooden sword. Started carrying a wooden sword. And then when guys attacked him with real swords, he'd just pull out his wooden sword and he'd break their leg or break their arm or something like that. And that would put an end to the fight without killing them. And that's another interesting thing that you often find if you look back through history, that often what's happened with famous fighters, famous people, they've evolved, famous fighters usually that have had real fights, they evolved to a point where they don't want to fight anymore. Well, Shiba, the guy that developed Aikido, was like that. He'd had a lot of real fights in China and in other places with fights to the death. And he decided the same thing. He was a Buddhist as well, and he got to a point in his life where he decided he didn't want to kill people anymore, and that's why he developed Aikido, so that, you know, he can defend himself without killing people. So it's a common thread. It's the evolution. Guys that fight and fight and fight and fight. I mean, total respect to UFC or whatever, you know, cage fight guys, you know, no rules fighting. If that's what they want to do, total respect. I mean, that goes back to gladiator days. So if they want to do that, that's all fine too. But it's not why, you know, a lot of evolved people don't do martial arts, because that's the only reason. They want to evolve themselves, you know, their heart and their spirit past to something more, you know. But yeah, the interesting thing about Musashi was that which sword's better? Well, he used a wooden one. So again, it doesn't really matter what style, what art, what martial art it is, what weapon. It doesn't really matter. It's the person who's there, you know. And anybody who's trained up and knows, you know, you get attacked by a knife or a baseball bat or something. If you've got the heart and the willingness, and you're calm and relaxed and trained, and someone attacks you with a baseball bat or a knife, you can win. So again, it's heart and how calm you are, you know, and that's one of the biggest challenges for most guys in conflict, is staying calm, because they get angry. They get angry and emotional, and then they lose. And that Kujita, interesting, that story with Musashi, with the wooden oar thing and the sword, he turned up late on purpose, and what it did was it made the other guy pissed off because he turned up late, and he did it on purpose. He used to do that. He'd turn up early or turn up late, and he turned up late, and the other guy was offended and pissed off and came running down the beach and drew his sword out and threw the saya, threw the scabbard away, and said, you know, you're late, you bastard. And Musashi said, you've already lost. Why else would you throw your scabbard away? Because if the guy thought he was going to win, he would have kept the scabbard, because he's going to need it after the fight, right? But he threw it away. And Musashi said, you've already lost. And again, see, that guy had lost his cool. That's why Musashi used to mess with their heads. He'd turn up early, he'd turn up late. See, again, it wasn't how good he was trained up, it was how smart and switched on he was. He was a really switched on guy, and he knew how to manipulate people, and he used to win as a result. So, should talk about him more. Should do a video about him for the Japan channel. Anyway, there it was. It's the heart and the mind and the calmness, you know, as well as the training and the art and the weapon. More videos coming soon.